I want to welcome everyone to my first ever live video here on YouTube. I'm so excited to have you all here today with me as we celebrate a huge milestone, 150 episodes of the Your Enriched Self Podcast. It has been an incredible journey, and I am thrilled to share the special moment with all of you. So whether you are a longtime listener or if you're new to this community, thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for joining me on this enriching adventure and being on this platform. Today's session, we're going to be talking about the power of persistence. Now, as part of this monumental event, we are doing a few firsts here on the podcast. For one, we're doing a live event. We've never done a live event. And secondly, this is our first guest. We're having our first guest today, Dr. Sarah Mack. And this week, in honor of welcoming her to this podcast, I want to share with you her background. Dr. Sarah Mack is a licensed psychologist and owner of Perspectives and Vidal Magnolia, which is dedicated to closing the mental health gaps and creating wellness spaces for healers. Today, Dr. Sarah Mack will share her personal story of persistence and how she used her hardships as motivation to become the woman that she is today. So get ready for this mind-blowing session. We will have conversation to transform the way you think about being persistent. Yes. So I'm going to turn my attention away from me and talk to our wonderful guest, our very first guest of this 150th episode of the Your Enriched Self Podcast, Dr. Sarah Mack. Yeah. And so welcome to the platform.
Thank you. And big congratulations. This is amazing. I remember when you first started, and just to think about the steps that you had to take and to get here and being part of this production, it really means a lot. So I really appreciate you inviting me in. It's been great. Yeah, absolutely. So far it's already been great.
Yes, awesome. So let's talk about, first of all, what you do every day and this wellness environment, this wellness space that you've created for healers. I think that's a really important piece of things.
Yeah. So just a little bit about me. I love what you talked about, which is becoming. It's been really interesting being a person who is an observer, kind of a person who's a shy, introverted person, becoming more of a professional, licensed psychologist, and really being able to work with families who've gone through trauma, families who may have concerns related to ADHD, autism, but learning more about myself during that entire process and observing myself, observing families, being able to support and get into a place of understanding that, like, as healers, and whatever that means, healers can be parents, they can be children, can be healers. There's so many different types of individuals who pour into others. And being a licensed clinical psychologist, recognizing that we sometimes need healing ourselves, and going through my process has kind of led me to this place to become more aware of what do we need. We need wellness, we need space, we need support, we need love, we need reciprocity.
Yes.
And so I've been really sitting in the space, maybe over the past 2 years, of shifting my life from survival mode and going into more of a thrive space. And so that process of about 2 years has led me to really wanting to focus on healers, really wanting to create spaces to where we can, within our bodies, feel safe, within our spaces, feel safe, and be able to heal and do what we need to do so we can thrive. So that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. I love that, because I think it's so important, right? As you go through your own journey, that you're finding spaces, like you can go back and save the people that were once in a place that you were.
Yeah.
Because you had to realize at some point that you needed that for yourself.
Yeah.
And you needed that to thrive. And now you're in a position to thrive. And now you can go back and get the people that were probably or feel stuck or feel hopeless about where they are as opposed to where they want to go.
That's, I think, has a lot to do with well spaces. Developmentally, we're in different spaces, different seasons. And so I do believe earlier on in my career, I was assigned to certain people within that space in my life, and I could touch certain people within that space in my life. And now things are different. And so it's like being able to reach a different set of individuals, or even individuals who are ready for something that looks a little different than before. We're always progressing. I think that's the best part about the human experience is growth. And so I know we're talking about like power and persistence and like what helps us to really grow and create our lives, and being in this space to be able to serve not only just others, but really being able to take care of self so we can go the long distance. I think it's important. So it's all about like what spaces are we planting ourselves in to be able to grow? Are we repotting and going into a different soil, a different, climate? I think the most beautiful thing is I would say a prayer about God. You know me. I'm just learning who I am.
Oh, wow.
You know the fullness. Help me to see the fullness of who I am. So if I'm, planted in this pot and I think I'm like a sunflower, and I'm so proud of like being a beautiful sunflower. But he's like, you know what? I see more. So I'm going to move you to a different terrain. And maybe you're more of like an oak tree, or maybe you're more of like a, who knows? And he knows. And so I think being open to moving and being in different spaces sometimes brings out new gifts, brings out new like things that you never knew about yourself. And so that's why I'm really excited about this space that I'm into.
I love that. And you talk about planting, and that's like a space that is so close to my heart because I grew up with a gardener. My mother was a gardener of life.
I didn't know that.
My mother had and still has a garden. And I grew up just being part of that experience of being in a garden. And so I understand that whole analogy of sometimes we're planted in the wrong space. And sometimes when we're planted, we need to get rid of some of the weeds that are around us, right? And so my mother spent a lot of time in her garden cleaning up the spaces around there and then looking for the right space for the right type of plant, whether it was an herb or a plant or some type of fruit tree. She was always looking for the right place for that thing to thrive. And I think that's an important piece of it. And sometimes, as you mentioned, the whole scenario with a pot, we're placed in a small container.
That's
right?
restricting.
And that's restricting our growth.
Yeah.
And so I think for somebody like me who's not quite a green thumb like my mother.
I'm not either. I like the analogy, but I can't do the practical stuff.
My daughter is, my sister is, she can grow in abundance. I still am working with the gift that maybe my mother gave to my daughter or something. I don't know. But I think it's really important to recognize the season that you're in and what you need to thrive in the next season. And I heard something recently, and I guess I didn't know this, but I love reading and I love exploring different facts. And one of the things I recently, and I talked about it on one of my podcast episodes, was the fact that when a plant is or a tree is put into the ground, it grows down first, right? And then, and oftentimes you don't get to see the progress. Like you were talking about, we're in this progressive space. I think a lot of times in our culture, we want to see the fruits of the labor of everything that we've done. And we don't get to see that yet. You got to grow down first. And the reason for that is to establish those roots, because you're going to need those roots to withstand the rain and the pain and the wind and all the things that are going to come along in life.
It's true.
And I think we don't cherish that. We don't cherish our grow down season. Where our heads are down and we're doing the studies. And we're just in that practical space of where we need to be now. So that when we grow up and the storms come, we're not going to be, gone to and fro with the winds. We'll be able to not be gone with the wind, right? We'll be able to withstand whatever comes. So I think that's just so powerful when you think about our growth as people.
For sure.
And how we want to see the top, right? We want to see the topsoil. But there's a lot going on in the bottom that we need to be aware of. And so that's what we want to get down to today. We want to get to the root of your story, your background, and where you started. For you, I just want to know, like, what does it mean for you to be persistent?
I think it's a great question. And I've really kind of reflected over persistence. And to me, it's really mirrored into hope for me. I'm more of a visionary person. And so I'll imagine things and I'll consider, like, what could life be for me? And having a glimpse of hope helps me to persist towards it. So for me, I've been in positions, I do believe that, you know, the hope has faltered, or like I'm not really quite sure. And even in those moments, I think there are certain signs and things that, like, sometimes you're just in a routine and you're just continuing what you've already started because you had the hope to start with.
Yes.
So it's just something that allows you to start to pick up the momentum of your life. I also think persistence allows you to create the life that is promised to us, that we deserve, and sometimes it takes so much time to get there. But persistence has an opportunity to enjoy each part of the journey. If I have to sum it up, persistence to me is really key in having hope. It's almost like following the hope.
Right.
And even when the hope falters and it's dark, like we're in the weeds that we were talking about, because we've created such little steps, it's our motor, it's our momentum, it's becoming who we are, it's our identity. When people see that we're a little bit off kilter, they're like, hey, where are you? And they kind of put us back where we're supposed to be. And it helps us to continue to go until we see that light again. But at the beginning of it, for me, is hope.
Good.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. Do you see a relationship between persistence and consistency?
Yeah, I do. I do think that people get real worried about the word consistency. And for me, I'm very much a flexible person. I think of consistency over time. So today I may not necessarily do the exact same routine as yesterday, but over time I am consistently always doing something to go into that box of whatever my intention is. So for me, I'm very much a complex person. Consistency for me could be today I pray, tomorrow I have a color scheme that links to that prayer. Tomorrow I have a conversation that links to that intention. The next day I have a full day of like actually grind work that links to that intention. So it's different things that I'm doing. I'm not consistently doing the same thing that bores me.
Okay.
People have to kind of find what consistency actually looks like for them and honor that like, even though today I didn't wake up at 5 o'clock and work out, that's me. Some people can do it.
Right.
That health is still my intention. So how am I going to continue to be consistent with that, even if it looks diverse within my consistency? So it's absolutely key. And I think sometimes folks get choked up on it because they think it looks a certain way, but it really is the matter of just continuing to lean into those different types of strategies that we have for ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. And that's something I preach all the time about your definition of success, your definition of what consistency is. I mean, you define something very well down to the intention of the day and down to the grind day. And I think that's missed because we are so enamored with what culture says we need to do and what consistency looks like.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you described, the 5 a.m.er, right?
Which one?
I'm one of those people in day to day, but it took some time to get there. Like you said, it's over a period of time. And I think a lot of times we want to go from zero to 1,000.
Yep.
And we want to do it the way somebody else did it because it looked good and it felt like it looked good. And we miss the opportunity to create our own spaces where we are healing ourselves through just doing things at our pace, right? I'm a runner, so we always talk about your race, your pace.
Yeah.
You know, you can't look at other people's, run time or what have you. I've seen improvement, but I've seen improvement because I've done things to improve.
And I think that also has to do with our root structure that you were talking about before. Your root structure might look different than my root structure. And so the things that are really going to be my gifts might look different than your gifts. If I'm trying to imitate what you're doing, it's not going to go as deeper. It's not going to go and expand within my soil and my infrastructure and what I'm planting in. So exactly what you're saying is, I think part of persistence also has to do with a knowing of self. and not just knowing like who you are, but what around you serves you, is there for you. I think one of the things in my life that really helped me see is that there were other people who could see and understand who I was. And they would encourage, they would see like a light, or they would see a gift. Um, and it's now where it's like, oh, I get it, and having those different people around me to support me. When I was in college, I was around a community and a village. I think that really solidified my foundation on helping me to keep my hope. And so I had Micah, my daughter, when I was pregnant with her at 18.
Okay.
I had her at 19. So my freshman year, the spring of my freshman year is when I found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
It was one of those things where it was just like, you have hope, you have vision. And as a young child, I always kind of had a knowing.
Yeah.
That was to me a gift from God for sure, that I would have these little sayings like, don't be ordinary, be extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And, just different things. I don't even know where they came from, but they just always would hold on. I would hold on to them. And so that life event didn't necessarily line up with what was being created in my mind. So I had my root structure of what I knew for myself, but now I'm in this environment that I'm not really familiar with. I don't know how to consolidate the two. And my village, whatever was in my pot, my mentors, I remember being in a scholarship program for a year, and then I was supposed to be a mentor the second year. And I went to the advisor and I was like, Larry, I'm so embarrassed. I'm pregnant and I don't think I deserve to be a mentor. And he said, you were still the same person you were. Like, let me just put some thoughts to this. And if you're comfortable with being who you are, which is a mentor, you can continue. And so I was a pregnant mentor that second year, but it was someone in my village that was like, this is who you are. We see it. We see your light. And it was an opportunity for me to go a different route, or to kind of lean into the story of like a failure versus the story of, this is life, this is who you are, this is something that is going to prepare you for more. So I do think when it comes to like those darker moments, that root system, there's fertilizer, there's so many things that's available to us to help us in those areas to keep us aligned. But it's really challenging to you can't see it yourself, and just trusting and knowing that those people are in the right spaces at the right time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, hearing that's so powerful to me, because, we oftentimes, we don't know the impact we have on others simply by seeing them for who they are.
Yeah.
And I think that is a testament to persistence. For anybody out there listening and you're struggling with that, you may need to be in an environment where you have a village of people around you, the coach, the cheerleader, the person that will pray with you. There's so many different roles that your community played for you. And then you have the person that's in your face saying, wait, stop. Audible. We need to take a time out. We're not speaking that way, right?
Yeah.
Because that language that you were speaking out loud didn't align with the language that you were playing in your mind. Like, don't be ordinary, be extraordinary.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it was like he had the answers to the test, if you will. And so now he's saying to you, you can still be extraordinary right here. You are extraordinary. As a matter of fact, this makes you unique.
Absolutely.
Because how your testimony is going to tell for years to come to the next person that comes about is significant. So I think that's important. Shout out to all the mentors out there. If you are a mentor, because you make it happen.
Absolutely.
You remind us of who we are. You give us that light that we don't get to see, because when you are in a wilderness season, which is what I call it, I like to call it the wilderness season. I go back to the children of Israel, walking around for 40 years.
Yeah.
And in that wilderness season, it's so easy to just keep circling that mountain so many times over and over again, and not realizing you are, in fact, circling that mountain. So when you have been in situations where you are circling a mountain, Or have you been in a situation where you had to go around that mountain a couple times?
Yeah, for sure. So there's so many little points, and I think it's so interesting to be able to look back. It's such a blessing to be able to look back and to see and understand what those moments meant at the time. Because when you're going through them, you're just in it, and I think that's part of like the process of just figuring life out and holding on to those gems long enough for you to look back and say, "Oh, this is wisdom now."
Wow.
When I went to graduate school, graduated with my PhD, it was huge because I had a baby, at 19, graduated from undergrad, went through graduate school, incredibly difficult as a single parent, and a lot of challenges, a lot of trauma during that time as well. Finally graduate, completely burnt out at that point. And it's time for me to study for my licensure. You do all of this so that you can be a licensed provider. And I was tapped out. And I remember studying, doing the best I could. And when I tell you I failed that test the first time, it was just like, I don't have any more in me. I don't even know what else to do. I had finally graduated. I had gotten through fellowship. Like, this is the height of anything I'd ever done in my life. Truly extraordinary,
Yeah.
And now you can't go to the next level, that thought. So again, sometimes those failure thoughts and those, I call them adversary thoughts, they come against what you know to be true for yourself. And having to study again, having to push forward through all of the issues. I had to spend money that I didn't have to take a course. But I did pass that second time. But I do think that it wasn't an option. It was almost like, if I give up and don't take the test again, or if I allow this to like be my end and I take it and I fail again, then what?
Yeah.
I think part of like going around in the cycle for me is like, this is my life. Will I stay here? Do I enjoy this phase of life in this cycle? Is in this loop? Is this okay for me? Am I okay here? And a lot of times when I'm in that loop, I'm in despair, I'm in panic, I'm in a place that's very stressful, and I just don't like feeling that way. So there's something that has to push me beyond this loop that I'm kind of cycling through.
Yeah.
During that time, it was like, pulling up some extra money and figuring out how I'm going to take this course that was in Chicago that was going to teach me exactly what I needed to know to pass this test. But I think in other situations where I've been like cycling through, it really has been about what are the resources that are maybe more insightful than me, or that have made it through this position before, that I can lean on and just follow step by step, because I don't have the energy, I don't have the will to push over myself. I need some support. So I really do think, as we're talking about persistence and going around and around at those periods, it does have to do with what access we have to really be able to pull us through. And a lot of times I think people feel like, well, I don't have those supports. Yeah. I don't have the money to do it. I don't have mentors. I don't have the different people in our environment. I'm telling you, I would create mentors. TD Jakes was my mentor for a long time. He never knew it. Like there were people who were my mentors. They didn't even know it. I would study them. I would learn from them. I would become inspired from them, even though they didn't know it. Things that would just happen randomly, I would just pull that as a resource for myself of like, I needed to hear that today. That was for me. Even though they may have just been having a conversation at the grocery store, at the cashier, that was a prayer for me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes just being able to give yourself a lifeline, it's almost to the point of saying like, I know I'm not supposed to be here. There is a lifeline for me. I don't see it. Ooh, there it is. I'm going to take this one. This one is good enough.
Yes.
This is what I need to really push me over. And I think it's more of a commitment to who I know I'm supposed to be, or I'm knowing I'm supposed to be more than where I am right now.
Yeah. Ooh, there was so much here.
Yeah.
There's so much here that you provided. And I think one thing that stood out to me is that you could have spent your time, spend your wheels, circle that mountain, focusing on what you don't have. You didn't have the money. You didn't have the training. You didn't get the test right. You didn't, right? But what you did was you did an inward introspection, and you went on a journey to find out, well, what do I need to get over here?
Absolutely.
So I need a mentor. I can't afford one. I don't know one. I don't have one.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be. But I found one on TV. I found one on the streaming services. I found one on YouTube. I found one somewhere.
In a book.
In a book, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's so important in this conversation of persistence, because a lot of times we think that what we need, first of all, we're not even focusing on what we need. We spend our time
On what we
focusing
don't have.
on what we don't have.
Yeah.
That's the pit.
That's a trick.
That's the trick. That's the trap, right?
Yep.
The real flex is to come up out of that, which is what you did through that internal self-awareness work
Yeah.
of getting to know, well, what do I need? Because you say something that's so familiar to me. If I'm going through something and I'm in a wilderness season, I often say this is not the end of my story.
Yeah.
Like, my story doesn't end here. There are still chapters.
Yeah,
There's
for
still
sure.
paragraphs to be written about my story. This might be a blip. This
Yeah.
might be a sentence. This might be a word in the entire book of who I am, the book of Mylene. This is not my story. This is not how my story ends. So that stood out to me, because I say that all the time to myself. But I think what's most important are those words that you say to yourself
Yeah.
about what you need, and you go after that with what you have.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think we need to have everything ironed out. We need to have everything pressed and perfect. I grew up when my mother made us iron our clothes every day. I think that's why I don't iron as much anymore. But everything had to be laid out and prayed out and ironed out down to the socks.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. And I think we don't need that right now. What you have, you already have it. You already obtain it. You already
Yeah.
possess it, is what I'm saying. And I think a lot of times we try to look for the external things to validate that we are going in the right direction. Well, you're going in the right direction because you're going in the direction of your purpose.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, from what you were saying, it was really full, but it was full of purpose. I think
Yeah.
at the top of it all,
Yeah.
at the base of it all, really was the purpose. Like, you knew that you were meant for more. You knew that you were extraordinary.
Yeah.
And you didn't settle. You could have.
Yeah.
It's easy to stop. And so, to that point about stopping, do you think that when people stop, there is an opportunity for them to persist even when they take that stop? Do you think there's a challenge? Do you think there's a challenge that when we stop, is it hard when you stop to persist? Is it harder to stop to persist
like,
when you
start back
stop
up.
to start back up? Or what do you see about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I do feel that there are periods of time where a stop is necessary, but it also, to me, I feel like it comes with the knowing of what season we're in. I feel that stops are just like failures. They're not like stops, you failed. They're adjustments.
Okay.
Everything is an adjustment. And so today, and again, thinking of your whole life and the thought of consistency, if I stop today, it doesn't mean that I stop forever. It may be just a stop for this season. I need to lean into my heart, or I need to lean into my health, and then I pick it up because I'm restored. And I think being very mindful of what do I need in this season in order to go the longest. We're talking about persistence, which has to do with sustainability.
Right.
So if I'm going to persist, then that means my brain, my heart, my body, my spirit has to go the long distance. And so I do feel like a premature stop can be from anything. It can be from fear, avoidance. And I think those kind of superficial stops, I can't do it, I'm not going to do it, it's different. than what I'm speaking of now.
Okay.
So
See.
I feel like there's a knowing and an adjustment where sometimes it's like, I need a breath, but I'm still consistently working at a different level. Maybe not 100%, maybe not 50%, maybe at 25%. But I never stop. I'm always in movement. I'm always in motion, but I'm resting, and rest and stop is different. For folks who like actually just quit or give up, honestly, I think part of my worldview is there are no mistakes.
Yeah.
And a quit and a give up actually could be, it could teach a lesson. So the way I view everything is that if you quit or you give up, you cannot leave that period place in your life without grabbing the lesson. If you quit and you give up and then you're like, I'm just a failure, I'm not going to do it anymore, you're not grabbing wisdom. If you say, you know what, I'm making a decision to quit and stop right now because this is good for my health, I need to do this, I'm going to prioritize X, Y, and Z, and maybe I can pick it up in the future. All of those words are feeding whatever purpose is at the base. So I do think for some people who don't grab the wisdom, it's harder to start back up. The reason that I feel like if you don't grab the wisdom, it's harder to start back up is because you're setting a different foundation. You're setting a different foundation that says, oh, I tried, but it didn't work out for me. The world doesn't have me in its cards. That is a narrative that is very real for people. So when I tried something, it just didn't quite work out because I already thought or knew that it wasn't going to work out for me. I think that comes from quitting too earlier on in our development. I have this thought about like younger, I have a heart for like tweens and teens, folks shifting over because I was pregnant when I was 18. So that's kind of like a really hard space for me where I feel like if I had given up at that point, wow, I would have learned that giving up is an option. Mm-hmm. And also all of these things that happen in my life after giving up, it means something to me. So like I don't have what it takes, or perhaps, things kind of settle out the way they're supposed to. Maybe I'm not extraordinary. Maybe this is just the life I'm supposed to have. And that's now the foundation at 18 that I'm building on. I think if you learn to persist earlier in life, it flexes this muscle. Yeah. It's like being able to see faith open up your life. So I don't think it's hard to start back up. I think it's almost like creating this narrative for your life, which makes it less likely for you to try sometimes. Yes. Because I think like, oh no, that's not for me. It's not for people like me. Why would I do that? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think there's a strong relationship with persistence, and oftentimes we want to feel comfortable as we go through things. We don't want to feel discomfort, otherwise stated, right? And so when we feel a discomfort, that's where it feels hard. Mm-hmm. And that's where we want to quit. Mm-hmm. And so I always say that hard is just you adjusting to something that's new. Mm-hmm. Because most people that are doing what they're doing, that have been doing it for a number of years or seasons or what have you, they're comfortable with it. They could probably, you hear people say, I can do it with my eyes closed. Yeah, because you're comfortable with it. But put you now in a new situation where things are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. There is a level of discomfort or pain, right? Internally, externally, mentally, whatever, financially, right? Yeah. Thinking back to your situation, there were some financial challenges there too. Yeah, for sure. And so it's easy to just bow out at that point and say, well, I don't have that money. I'm not going to ever have that money. And just have that narrative that you talked about. Yeah. But it's so important at that point to say, okay, this is hard for me now because it's new to me now. Yeah. Right? What's hard is just new. That's how I like to look at hard. It's just new.
The narrative is everything. Yeah. I think for a person who has a different narrative, if they quit tomorrow, they'll pick it up again. Like if they have a narrative that I can do it and I can quit today and I can pick it back up again.
Tomorrow's a new day.
Tomorrow's a new day. Yeah. But if I have that narrative that like it's over, it's failure, those are the narratives that make it harder to start up again, I do think. And I also think that when it comes to you're talking about like I can do it with my eyes closed. It's almost like I remember saying something like get comfortable with discomfort. I'll have to say two things about that. The first was it was really helpful in that season for me to recognize and build meaning around pain. So you were talking about the root system underground in the darkness. In our culture, we live in dichotomy, dark versus light, good versus that bad. But in my narrative, in my thought system, God is abundant. So even in the dark system, that's good.
That's good. Yeah.
It's beauty, it's dearth, it is so much that you're absorbing, it's nutrients, it's nurture. And so to say, like, I'm having a painful point, I'm like, what is God infusing in me right now that feels like so, and just being able to draw a narrative around what is this dark space or this underground space that I'm in right now. I laugh because I'm also a complainer. Micah, she's so funny because she's like, Mama, like if I'm physically in pain, if I hurt my foot, I'm going to complain about it. Like I'm going to talk about it all the time. That's just who I am. So I will complain about it, but I also will, in my quiet time, really meditate on like, what does this pain mean for me? Is this the end of my story? And really taking the opportunity to live while I'm in this dark space. I think when my nephew passed away, I think that was probably the darkest space I've ever been in that I can kind of recognize. And part of it was such a contrast from like who I envisioned myself to be, who I knew myself, my narrative, because my narrative is light, it's energized, it buzzes, it's like, all of that warmth. So when he passed away, it was cold. I remember even in my dreams, they were in black and white. I normally am a dreamer. Everything just was very much dark. And I think in those seasons, it was very much a time for quiet with just me and God. And I would just talk like, what is this about? And just not ever having that opportunity to be that close to God and just being that close in my prayers and everything else is quiet. There's nothing else that can pull me out of this space. So what does this space mean for me? I had to make meaning of it. And I think when it comes to trauma, when it comes to life events, sometimes it really does help us to thrive if we can make meaning of those moments and then shift out. Versus sometimes life happens so quickly. And I think part of persistence is being able to make meaning because there are certain things that tap people out. And it's really hard to overcome and restore, and it takes time. And I think for me, that was part of it, of like figuring out while I'm in this dark space, what is the meaning of this, Lord? What is this helping me with in the future that I can't see now? And it's so I can't understand it, but just hold me and help me through this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What I hear from you here is quiet time.
Mm-hmm.
I call it holy moments
Mm-hmm.
where you can just be alone, be with God, be in prayer, be in meditation. I think that's a theme, kind of going back to this healing space that you create for healers.
Yeah, for sure.
And we are, as you mentioned, healers can be parents. They're not necessarily people in a field or
for
a
sure.
discipline, but we are healing someone
Absolutely
now in our lives. We are healing ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
There might be some things from childhood or even in adulthood, there are things that we have to heal from that are happening in real time in living color.
Absolutely.
And so those quiet times, I absolutely cherish my quiet times. I think that's one of the reasons why I adopt the early mornings as my time. My husband will say over and over again, like, you're a morning person. And it took me a while to embrace that. But I recognize that I really enjoy moments on the deck where I'm just listening to the birds chirp while I have coffee, or just complete quiet and silence, knowing that, okay, they'll be up for another couple of hours. I still have, like, it's my time.
Exactly.
And I think on the journey of persistence, there has to be that element of finding you in the day, finding you in the moment.
Yeah.
After the moment, right? The thing that occurred, the life event that you just talked about. I think we just go from journey to journey,
Oh my
journey to
God.
journey, and we don't take a moment
Yeah.
to persist from within.
Oh my
right? Because the
gosh.
within needs to be healed, to be helped, to be nurtured. And so when we talk about that underground, I think the underground is a beautiful place. And I love that you highlighted it because we often just go like, I just want to have the fruit and look cute and people can, benefit from the fruit that I'm providing. But that dark time is not necessarily what dark tends to get
Yeah.
that type of highlight to it. I think it
Yeah.
is a beautiful time to get the nutrients and find out what do I need right now.
Yeah.
What do I need tomorrow?
Yeah.
Now is one moment, but tomorrow is a moment. Next week is a moment.
Yeah.
So I think that dark time is beauty. And if you are a believer, and if you know that when there's dark, all you need is a glimmer of light.
Yeah.
All you need is a glimmer of light, and it changes the entire outlook, the entire outcome.
Yeah.
And your mindset, that changes everything. That goes back to hope.
That goes back to hope.
Yeah.
So it really is as you were speaking, like being in those darker spaces, I feel that it just wipes out what you think you need. You think you need friendship or you think you need, money or the homes and blah, blah, blah. And it floors you. It just puts you down to the point of like, no, you need healing. Your heart needs to be restored. Like, I feel like there were messages during that period of time that I didn't realize. You need boundaries. You need
boundaries. Wait. We got to pause on that one.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
When you're on any journey.
And I think for me, and that was, the start of a journey for me of saying, like, what about you, Sarah? What about you? Being a healer, for me, started from a place of seeing others, understanding, having empathy, because I've gone through it too, and knowing exactly what to do. The second part of my life has been, what about you? Who are you? Just be.
Yeah.
Just sit in the room and be who you are and let everything else fall in its course, not do. And so for me, I think sitting in those darker spaces gave me messages that I just didn't know how to like create myself. And I think the meaning of like going through doing therapy with folks and helping them to see like there's something here that we have to hold on to, a message that's helping us to shift into another part of our lives. But it's such a, from the human experience, it's such a hard thing to grasp sometimes. But I definitely see now, as far as like the wellness piece, that's my baby, because it's like, it's for me. So I started this whole thing with like surviving to thrive. I'm so like, it's kind of funny to me because I was like, Lord, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready. I'm feeling burnt out. Like, the story, the journey. Well, it's time for healers to heal. It's time for us to have our spaces. And I feel like I was like, yep, it's time for you. It's time for you to heal. It's time for you to have your space. Okay. And so it's interesting how like I'll start here and I'll create, the content. I'll create the different types of infrastructure that I want to go through the curriculum. And the last 2 years has been, my life is the curriculum.
Ooh.
No more for others. Now you need to receive the healing. You need to be able to restore. I know there's something on the other side of this for me as well. I know that the well spaces are coming, but I'm in my well space and I'm well.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's for right now, that's my space.
Good.
I think creating the new spaces is just going to come from just being. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So it's kind of interesting. I don't have the words and the vocabulary now because I'm kind of in it. But I do sense that the extension of this is really coming from just a really more secure, more weighty place than I've been in the past. So my persistence feels different. It doesn't feel energized, electric, passionate. It feels very restful. And if you disrupt something out of my piece, it's just more settled.
Yeah.
And then from there, it just continues to move. It's different.
Yeah. I think that's a good perspective, that persistence has seasons and it shows up differently. It's going to be a different type of persistence. Sometimes that persistence is energetic, it is flowing, it's moving, it's going, it's doing the things.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's just restful.
Yeah.
It's sitting. It is breathing.
It's breathing.
It's doing the basics, right? That we take for granted.
Yeah, that
We
are
take for
really
granted
powerful.
breathing, right? And those things are really important. I think the last thing I want to talk about is persistence as a superpower. You know, I think when we think about superpower, we think about superheroes and,
Yeah.
you know, the ones that can fly, Superman, Batman, you know, Spider-Man, all the people
Absolutely.
in the different universes, the Marvel universe, the Avengers. We think about all those different superheroes and the powers they have to, you know, change the outcome of a situation or manipulate something. And I see persistence as a superpower.
Yeah.
How do you see it? Do you feel the same?
I
What do you
love
think
that
about it?
analogy. You know, a lot of times when I work with families and people in general, I talk about the human experience. Like, there's so much about our culture that shifts us into being machines. You know, sometimes there's this like whole alien type of concept that people talk about. The superwoman, the black woman, the cape, all of those things. But what's so powerful, what you said about sometimes the base, just breathing, the base of just being a human, just human, is so powerful. Like, I think when it comes to being persistent and it being a superpower, is saying, I am enough to keep going. Even within this space of being like a, 18-year-old girl from Madison, Mississippi. Woo!
Wow.
You know, it's just like going international, meeting my husband, living this life, building these things, having multiple companies. That's not ordinary.
That is not ordinary.
But I'm an ordinary human
Yeah.
who made a choice to persist, to be persistent, to be consistent, to be knowing within myself. And any ordinary human being can have that power. And I think one of the things that I am learning too is the power of choice. It's so powerful. And I think being in the trauma field, there's so many things culturally that take away your power of choice, power of choice. And so being able to persist in something and create your life the way you never like you never knew it could be, is powerful.
Yeah.
I do see that for sure. And I think that ordinary humans can become superhumans, extraordinary with persistence for sure.
Yeah. And it's a differentiator, right? Because it's the thing that, and not necessarily differentiating from other people. I think when we think differentiating, it's like where I'm a different person than you are, or what I do is more unique than you. I think it's a differentiator for you, for your own journey.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have it, then you kind of are stuck, or you stay in the same place, or you're circling that mountain.
Circling.
And so it's a differentiator that moves you into a new place, moves you into a new season, moves you into a new way of thinking.
Yes,
Because
for sure.
that's what happened on your journey, is that you always had this thought process, and it took someone from the outside to look at some things, and it took you to look at some internal things to see, hey, this is what I need, as opposed to, I don't have these things. And so I think when I think of it being a superpower, it is just you recognizing that you can move. And like you said, you have choice.
Yeah.
And I think we forget we have choice. We think we're stuck.
Yeah.
I always say you're not a tree, you can move.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can move, you can choose. And that's a huge power that I think we don't exercise enough.
Yeah.
Because we accept what the cards we're given, and we can choose a different way to go. We can choose a different route.
Yeah, for sure.
And it can take you new places. It can take you places
It can take you new places.
And like you said, be willing to embrace the thing that's unnatural, the thing that is not ordinary, right? That's how you embrace the extraordinary, because you're going to be in new spaces.
Absolutely.
So you have to be willing to embrace the discomfort, the extraordinary, the different. And I think persistence is significant. I think a lot of us miss the opportunity to do the things that we need to do. And I love the journey of what you said about the healing part and the internal work and the sitting.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like what persistence is for most of us, but I think it is.
Yeah.
It's really given me a new perspective on what it is and what it can be. So I really appreciate you bringing that outlook. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about here on the Your Enriched Self Podcast. Like I said, celebrating the 150th episode.
It's huge.
I'm really excited for this conversation. I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Also, be sure to check out the podcast for even more great content. And if you found this message helpful, please share it with someone who can benefit from it. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us to continue bringing valuable content. I want to thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.